In February of 1947, a letter arrived at a farmhouse near Register, Georgia. It was addressed to Sam Neville, a peanut farmer in Bulloch County. It had crossed an ocean to get there, from a small town in the Saar on the worn border between Germany and France, and the man who signed it, a German named Bernhard Erbelding, had spent part of the war behind barbed wire in that same county, working Sam Neville's fields under guard. The prisoner was writing back to the farm that had held him, and he was not the only one. All across the American South and Midwest that year, farm families were pulling letters out of their mailboxes with German stamps on them. By the end of this video, you will know what was in those envelopes, what one Georgia farm wife did about hers, and why, in the hungriest winter Germany had seen in living memory, so much of what kept German families alive arrived addressed from American kitchens. Start with the letter itself, because the first sentence of it is not what you expect from a man writing out of a broken country. He wrote, in his own English, "If there is any time in my captivity I remember with pleasure, it is the time during that I worked at your farm with my comrades." And later in the letter, "We often spoke of you and remembered your benevolence and kindness." That is what he chose to open with, remembering. The rest of the letter was harder. It told the Nevilles what life looked like where he was standing and how his family was faring. A man does not mail a memory across an ocean unless the present has run out of things to hold on to. No law made anybody in Georgia answer that letter. Whatever the Geneva Convention had required of the United States, it had required it for prisoners, and these men were prisoners no longer. Every obligation had sailed east with them. The Geneva Convention stopped applying. The farmers did not. That sentence is the whole video. Hold on to it and give me half an hour to earn it. To understand why that letter exists at all, you have to go back to the years when writing it would have been pointless, because the two men saw each other every day across a peanut field. During the war, the United States held hundreds of thousands of German prisoners on its own soil, and Georgia had its share of the camps. One of them sat near Statesboro, in Bulloch County, and from 1943 to 1945, the men from that camp were sent out to the farms, because the farms had sent their own men to the war, and the harvest does not wait. In Bulloch County, the crop was peanuts. Sam Neville's farm was one of the places they worked. We know a handful of the men by name because the family kept their letters. 9 letters, 5 men. Erbelding was one. A man named Johannes Rusch was another. Every one of those letters was written after the war was over, which tells you that something happened in those fields that outlived the reason the fields had prisoners in them. The letters do not explain what that something was. They only show what it left behind. Men worked side by side through 3 harvests. Somebody learned somebody's name. Somebody's kindness got remembered in a language it was never spoken in. That is apparently all it takes. And be clear about what this was at the time. Not charity, a transaction. The farmer got his crop in. The army got its prisoners worked. The prisoner got out from behind the wire for a day and did something a man recognizes as useful. Nobody standing in that field in 1944 would have told you they were watching the start of a 30-year correspondence. Which is exactly why what happened after deserves a video. In the fall of 1945, the work details stopped. The camps were emptying out. The men were going home. That word, home, is about to do a lot of dishonest work in this story. Because for hundreds of thousands of these men, the ship that pointed east did not go home. The paperwork called what came next repatriation. Through that winter, the trains ran east to the ports, to staging posts like Camp Shanks in New York, and by the summer of 1946, the camps across the states stood empty. The word was repatriation, and the word was not lying exactly. It was just leaving out a stop. Take one of them. George Brandenstein had spent his captivity working a celery farm near Muskegon, Michigan, for a family named Bishop. In February of 1946, he walked up a gangway in New York next to his friend Harry Baer, another prisoner off the same farm, and the ship pulled out, and as far as they knew, they were going home to Germany. They were not. The ship landed them in France. The two friends were separated there, and by his own letters, Brandenstein spent about a quarter of a year in French custody before he finally reached his wife and 3 children in Rotenburg, in the American occupation zone. And he was one of the lucky ones. Here is something worth knowing about where a video like this even comes from, because it is not where you might think. Almost none of it sits in a government archive. The 10 Arkansas letters you will hear later survive in a university library. 400 more letters in this story spent decades inside a cereal box in Tennessee. The Neville letters survive because a farm family in Georgia kept a drawer shut for decades. This chapter of history lives in attics. If your people farmed in the 1940s, anywhere near the camps, a piece of it may be sitting in your house right now, and at the end of this video, I will tell you exactly what to look for. Subscribing tells me you want the letters read, not just the battles retold. Now, back to the men France was not letting go. This next part does not make the newsreels, and I am going to give you the government's own paper for it. Foreign Relations of the United States, 1947, Volume 3, Document 401. A cable from the American ambassador in Paris, dated March 13, 1947, nearly 2 years after the shooting stopped. The ambassador reports that France is holding 630,000 German prisoners of war, and that 450,000 of them were handed over by the United States. More than 500,000 of those men were working inside the French economy. 55,000 of them down in the coal mines. 210,000 on French farms. Sit with that. The men America shipped east in 1946 did not all step off onto a German dock. Hundreds of thousands stepped off into another set of camps, in France, and kept working as prisoners into 1947. Britain ran a version of the same arrangement. Prisoners shipped over from America landed at Liverpool and were told the work was not finished yet, and the last of them did not reach Germany until 1948. I am telling you this for 2 reasons. First, because this channel does not sell you a clean story when the record shows a complicated one. And second, because the United States put its objection in writing. In December of 1946, the American government formally demanded that the prisoners it had transferred to France be sent home, at a rate of at least 20,000 men a month, finished by the following October, with an option for any man who freely chose it to stay on and work for wages, under contract, as a free man. Washington had handed those men over. Washington also went on record trying to get them home. So, when a letter from Germany finally reached a mailbox in Georgia, or Michigan, or Arkansas in 1946 or 47, understand what that letter had already survived. The man writing it had worked extra harvests in a third country he never chose, and then come home to something worse than captivity. What did Bernhard Erbelding and George Brandenstein actually come home to? There is an oral history at the Truman Library, recorded years later, from a German official named Günther Harcourt. He called the winter of 1946 into 47, and I am quoting, the time of the shortest and most meager supply ever. 1,000 to 1,500 calories a day, almost no heating fuel. Worse, he said, than any winter of the war itself. The war had been over for a year and a half, and Germany was hungrier than it had been under the bombs. Put numbers around that. In the summer of 1945, actual rations across the Western occupation zones ran between 700 and about 1,200 calories a day. In the British zone, which held Hamburg, the official ration fell to 1,000 calories at the end of February 1946, and it did not climb back above 1,500 until the spring of 1947. Just before Christmas of 1946, a joint Allied nutrition survey found that most German adults had been officially allotted under 1,500 calories for the entire year, when 2,000 was the recognized minimum for a working adult. An American adult in that same year was eating over 3,000 calories a day. An American soldier about 4,000. A grown man in Hamburg was legally entitled to a quarter of what a GI ate. Those are the years the letters came out of. Brandenstein wrote to the bishops that the plant where he had found work shut down for lack of fuel, that he had no job, and that his family did not have enough to eat. The man who had left a Michigan celery farm well-fed came home lighter by tens of pounds and said so in his letters. So these men did the thing that should have been unthinkable for a defeated soldier. They sat down, found a pencil, and wrote to their captors. And here is where the story stops being simple, because the Americans who wanted to answer those letters, and there were many, ran into a wall. The wall was their own government. For the whole first year after the surrender, official American policy was that no relief went to Germany. Not from charities, not from churches. The international relief agencies working Europe were there for liberated Allied nationals, for the survivors of the concentration camps, for displaced persons of nearly every nation except one. The State Department went as far as blocking a shipment of milk for German infants offered by the Vatican, and another offered by German families in Chile. Milk, for babies, blocked at the border. That was the policy. And if you want to know how the White House felt, you do not have to guess, because the President put it in a letter. December 21st, 1945. Harry Truman, writing to a United States Senator, in his own words, "I cannot feel any great sympathy for those who caused the death of so many human beings by starvation, disease, and outright murder." And further down the same letter, "No one should be called upon to pay Germany's misfortunes except Germany itself." That is not a footnote in some policy paper. That is the President of the United States, in writing, in the first winter after the war, saying no. And I will be honest with you, it is not hard to understand him. The camps had just been opened. The photographs were in the American newspapers that spring. If this video pretended that anger was not real or not earned, it would be lying about the country it is trying to honor. But the argument had already started. In May of 1945, the same month the war in Europe ended, America's Catholic bishops declared that, quote, "It is unworthy of the victors to revenge injustices by violating human rights." By January of 1946, it was not just the churches. 34 United States senators, more than a third of the Senate, signed a petition to the President demanding that Germany and Austria be opened to private relief organizations. And the language they aimed at their own government's policy is the kind you do not forget. They warned that the food situation, quote, "increasingly marks the United States as an accomplice in a terrible crime against humanity." Accomplice? A third of the Senate said that about their own country, while the ruins were still smoking. There were colder heads in the argument too. General Lucius Clay, running the American zone of Germany, put it in purely practical terms in March of 1946. There is no choice between becoming a communist on 1,500 calories and a believer in democracy on 1,000 calories. Feed them, or lose them. Conscience said one thing, strategy said the same thing, and between the two of them, the wall came down. In February of 1946, Truman, the same Truman, approved the umbrella organization that finally let American relief agencies operate inside Germany. He brought Herbert Hoover, the one living American who had fed a broken Europe once before, back into service at the head of a famine committee, and in February of 1947, Hoover made a second survey trip, this one through Germany and Austria themselves. The president had said no in December. 14 months later, his own administration was measuring German hunger in order to fight it. What changed his mind is an argument you are welcome to have in the comments. What matters for our letters is the machinery that woke up next. In November of 1945, 22 American charities had banded together into a cooperative with a very plain name: the Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe, CARE. Their first product was not invented, it was salvaged. The American military had stockpiled millions of complete food rations for an invasion that never happened, the invasion of Japan. CARE bought close to 3 million of those ration packs. For $10, an ordinary American could buy one and have it delivered to a family across the ocean. And in May of 1946, the first 15,000 packages came ashore at Le Havre, in France. Germany was still off the list. That door opened in the summer of 1946, zone by zone. Everything you have heard so far was governments arguing with governments on paper. The rest of this video is none of that. The rest of this video is what individual American families did with $10 and a mailing address. It is the best part. In the special collections of the University of Arkansas, there is a folder called The German Prisoner of War Letters. 10 letters, written after the war, addressed to a man named E.D. Gregory, a planter and merchant near Parkdale, in Ashley County, down in the Arkansas Delta. The men who wrote them had been prisoners at Camp Dermott, and they had worked Gregory's land. 8 of them signed their names, and I am going to read those names slowly because this is exactly what this channel is for. Fritz Becker, Werner Gebauer, who wrote twice, Gustav Menke, Werner Schmitz, Gerhard Schnause, Helmut Schulz, Rolf Thienemann, Alfred Tschiersch. The 2 letters we can date were written in October of 1946 and January of 1947, and the university notes that the letters shed light on post-war conditions in Germany and in Austria, because defeat had scattered these men across 2 broken countries. The university's own catalog also says the letters, quote, speak to the relationships that developed between farmers and the prisoners they hired. 8 German veterans riding across an ocean by hand to the man whose fields they had worked as prisoners. Every person named in this video was real. No composite characters, no invented dialogue, and every letter I quote is a letter that exists in a library, a museum, or a family's keeping. The collections are listed below. I say that here because what comes next is the part you might accuse me of writing for effect if the paper did not survive. Finish the letter this video opened with. Bernhard Erbelding, February 1947, the Saar. The letter reached the Nevilles, and Mrs. Neville packed a box and mailed it. Clothing, the things his family could not buy at any price. On June 16, 1947, Erbelding wrote back. He thanked her, in his careful English, for the, quote, nice package. He thanked her on behalf of his wife and his children, and then he did 2 things in one letter that tell you what these letters actually were. He asked for more. Clothes and towels for a baby that was about to be born. and folded into the same envelope, he sent the Nevilles a gift going the other way. 20 postage stamps from the Saar. It was what he had. The title of this video says these men wrote, "Begging for food." I owe you a correction on my own title. The letters do not beg. Read them yourself. They remember, they give thanks, they ask plainly, and they pay what they can, 20 postage stamps at a time. The hunger of those years took a great deal from these men. Their dignity is not on the list. The second mailbox, Michigan. George Brandenstein, the man who came home through France, wrote to Bill Bishop from 1947 to 1950, and the Bishops answered with care packages, those $10 ration boxes, mailed from a celery farm in Muskegon to a hungry household in Rotenburg. A museum in Muskegon keeps the letters today, filed 1 folder per man. 8 folders of former prisoners who never stopped writing to the families that had worked them. And it was never just 2 farms. In Murdock, Nebraska, a man named Mel Luchens grew up playing with the German prisoners on his father's place. He remembered it simply, telling Smithsonian Magazine, quote, "They played games with us and brought us candy and gum." After the war, his family kept up a long-running exchange of letters with their former prisoners, and in the hungry years, they mailed food and clothing east. Years later, the Luchens family crossed the ocean themselves to visit those men at home in Germany. Now widen the lens, because the mailboxes were not the exception. They were the pattern. By the end of 1946, the relief umbrella Truman had approved had moved 10,000 tons of privately donated food and clothing into Germany, and CARE had delivered 550,000 packages there. The plain brown parcels that individual Americans mailed on their own, family to family, reached 17 million pounds in a single month that December. Over 3 years, private American parcels to Germany added up to 441 million pounds of goods, worth around $200 million, sent not to a government but to families. And 1/3 of everything the United States gave the world in aid in those years went to the country it had just defeated. No nation on earth gave Germany more. Konrad Adenauer, the man who would soon lead West Germany as its first chancellor, wrote in his memoirs what those parcels had meant, in part, quote, "It was not so much the material assistance that helped us as the connection with the outside world, the hope for reconciliation, a ray of light pointing to a brighter future." The hope, he said, not the calories. The third mailbox is the one that almost got thrown away. In the late 1980s, in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, relatives of a man named Curtis Peters were clearing out a great-aunt's house, and inside a cereal box they found letters, around 400 of them. Former German prisoners of war writing year after year to 2 local families, the Striblings and the Brocks. The earliest letters, from 1946, are letters asking for help. The last thing in the box is a Christmas card. It is dated 1976, 30 years of mail. One of the men, Willie Mueller, wrote this on September 3, 1948, and I want you to hear it exactly as he wrote it. "I think there would be no war and enemies in the world if the different nations could understand so well as we did. A defeated soldier in a ruined country, 3 years after losing everything, deciding that what he had learned on a Tennessee farm was the answer to war itself." When the box came to light, Curtis Peters said of the letters, quote, "For that long after the war, they show that's how close the relationship was." Some of the men in correspondences like these eventually crossed the ocean the other way for good and became Americans, but that is a different story, and this channel has told a piece of it before. Step back and look at the shape of this thing, start to finish. A country took in hundreds of thousands of its enemies, put them to work on its farms, and sent them east when the fighting ended. The law was done with them. The government was done with them. Every reason of state to be decent to a German expired at the dockside. Then the letters started coming, and in kitchens in Georgia, Michigan, Nebraska, Arkansas, and Tennessee, with their own sons barely home and the photographs from the camps still fresh in the newspapers, American families read letters from the enemy and packed boxes. Nobody ordered it. For most of a year, the rules actually forbade it, and the president himself had said no before the country argued him around. It was done at kitchen tables, $10 and one address at a time, by people whose names never made a headline. The men who received those boxes spent the next 30 years writing thank you letters, and some of them never stopped until the hand that wrote them gave out. The Geneva Convention stopped applying. The farmers never did. Now, the thing I promised you at that mailbox halfway through. If your family farmed in the 1940s anywhere near the camps, go look. A shoebox, a Bible with papers pressed flat in it, a cereal box on a high shelf. You are looking for thin envelopes with German stamps, dated 1946 to about 1950. If you find one, do not throw it away. Open it carefully, and then come back here and tell me two things: the name signed at the bottom and the town on the postmark. That is how a chapter like this stays found instead of lost. And the first of those envelopes may already be waiting in the comments below.